Lisa's heart pounded rapidly as fear began to plague her mind. The 70-year-old woman used every ounce of energy she had left to outrun the angered hippo, but she couldn't escape its grasp. As it latched onto her using its gaping mouth, it inflicted unimaginable pain with each passing second as its powerful bite crushed her body. From being dragged from a tent by a pack of hyenas and eaten alive, to being crushed by angry elephants, today, we're covering the 4 most terrifying deaths that happened during wildlife safaris. As always, viewer discretion is advised. November 11, 2017. 57-year-old Sabine Goossens and her friend, Wim van Grijnsven, were happily taking photos of animals, such as elephants and hippos, along a river in Livingstone, Zambia. Originally from Belgium, Sabine had long given up the cold winters of Europe and migrated to Africa, where she had spent the past 16 years. She was passionate about wildlife photography, and regions such as Livingstone and Zambia gave her all she needed to pursue her passion daily. Wim van Grijnsven, a 64-year-old from the Netherlands, decided to join her for a vacation. Sabine had likely shared her fascinating experiences, which involved observing diverse wildlife, including iconic species like lions, leopards, elephants, and buffalo. This likely prompted van Grijnsven to book a flight and visit his friend in hopes of seeing the beauty of these animals for himself. Upon his arrival, they spent time catching up and decided they would spend some time in Livingstone, where they could visit the national park. When they left their accommodation at Maramba River Lodge on November 11th to explore the Mosi Oa National Park, they were full of excitement, eager to witness the breathtaking beauty of these majestic creatures. But little did they know, neither of them would be returning to their accommodation that evening. The national park is nestled on the banks of the iconic Maramba River and is a known hotspot for antelopes, hippos, and crocodiles. Zambia is also home to the African savanna elephant, which can weigh as much as 15,000 pounds and can run at a staggering 25 miles per hour. It's also along an elephant corridor, where dozens of these enormous mammals can pass by at any second as they move between secure habitats, searching for food, water, and mates. But it's possible this resulted in a false sense of security around the animals, known for violent attacks when they feel threatened. On this particular day, Sabine spotted several elephants and decided to get as close as possible, hoping for the perfect shot. But as she inched closer and closer to the enormous animals, one of the elephants was quickly angered by her presence and immediately began to charge at her. Sensing the danger she was now in, Sabine dropped her camera, turned away from the enormous mammal, and began running for her life. As she panted and screamed for help, the elephant closed in with each passing second until it was right behind her. Following this, a brutal and vicious attack occurred as the huge mammal trampled the helpless woman, crushing her bones with its unimaginable power. Knowing his friend was in severe danger, panic must have flooded van Grijnsven's mind, forcing him to take action. He rushed to her aid, hoping to scare off the elephant, unaware that he too would be forced to suffer the wrath of the animal. Eyewitnesses at the scene of the incident claimed that van Grijnsven was also trampled by the wild animal, and by the time authorities arrived at the scene, the pair's lifeless bodies were lying on the ground with multiple horrific injuries. What was supposed to be a day of enjoyment for the friends soon turned into a tragic event that would, unfortunately, cost both of them their lives. In the aftermath of the incident, Zambian authorities have taken a proactive stance, reiterating warnings and advising tourists to maintain a safe distance from the wild animals that roam the national parks. Senior Wildlife Warden Louis Daka also stated to reiterate that those who visit Mosi Oa National Park must avoid getting too close to potentially dangerous animals like elephants, as at any moment, this can take a drastic turn for the worse. What startled the elephant on that fateful day remains up for debate. One theory is that it was a mother who considered Sabine a threat to one of her calves. Female elephants are known to be ultra-protective and will attack without hesitation if they consider anything or anyone a threat to their babies. These mammals are also known for having fairly long memories, which led some to suggest they hold grudges against humans. making them even more likely to attack if they feel threatened. The local police later opened an inquiry into the deaths of the two tourists, and their bodies were transported to the Batoka Hospital mortuary for examination. While they sustained devastating injuries during the terrifying ordeal, it appears to be a clear-cut case of the wrong time and place for Sabine and Van Grijnsven. Their untimely death serves as a reminder of the serious dangers associated with wildlife tourism in Africa. More so, this incident underscores the crucial role of authorities in ensuring tourist safety, especially when groups find themselves near wild animals. While Sabine saw her attacker coming, the young victim was unaware of the dangers that lurked in the shadows until it was too late. On July 18th, 2011-year-old Mark Garrit Shea and his mother, Molly Jacobs, were camping out under the stars in Moremi Wildlife Reserve in Botswana. As a kid with a keen interest in the natural world and animals, his mother could think of no better place to take his curious mind than the plains of Africa, where beasts and creatures of all kinds roamed free. But little did she know, this once-in-a-lifetime trip would take a dramatic turn for the worse, leaving her devastated and heartbroken. Mark and his mother lived in Brooklynville, a small community in Baltimore County, Maryland. He loved observing the stars and collecting rocks, and was avidly fascinated with wild animals. While his parents were separated, he spent a considerable amount of time at his father's house, where Mark had a shelf that displayed some of his most valuable treasures, including a whale's tooth, an elephant's tusk, and a bear claw. Despite his young age, he had traveled to various iconic destinations, including Mexico, Australia, the American Southwest, and even Africa. In 1999, he and his brother Bradford Shea experienced the wilderness of Africa as they visited several game parks and villages. This early exposure to the beauty and diversity of the African wildlife must have deeply influenced the young teenager, further intensifying his love for animals. The following year, July 2000, his mother decided to book a 25-day safari that would take them across Zimbabwe and Botswana to explore all that the Moremi Wildlife Reserve in Botswana had to offer. This particular region is known for its diversity of animals and promised unforgettable wildlife encounters that must have seemed so far from the reality Mark was used to in America. To truly immerse themselves in the experience and attain a closer connection to nature, the large group would camp out in the wilderness at the end of each day. On July 18th, their experienced wildlife guide, Matthew Montague, guided them to their campsite for the evening. The group settled in and began pitching their tents, cooking up meals over coal, and chatting about the wonderful experiences of the day. Many shared stories of the fascinating game they saw roaming the plains, and others spoke of the natural beauty they had found themselves in. At one point in the evening, just as they were dining, many of the group, including Mark and his mother, spotted a group of hyenas in the distance. Known as scavengers and opportunistic hunters, they are not picky when it comes to sustenance and will prey on animals of all kinds, including humans, if necessary. But despite their presence in the distance, the group was not worried. And once the stars began to appear overhead, many decided to call it a night and retreated to their tents. Wanting to give her son a sense of freedom, Molly allowed Mark to sleep in a separate tent just over 20 feet away from her own. The presence of the wildlife guide left many of the group feeling like they were free from harm's way. But the unpredictable nature of the African wilderness would soon manifest and turn this once-in-a-lifetime trip into a living nightmare. The hyenas had remained close to the camp, and as the noise died down and many fell asleep, they began to inch towards the camp, and it appeared that Mark became a target. As the teenager lay peacefully asleep in his tent, the pack of wild animals pulled him from his tent, awakening him almost instantly. They dragged him a short distance from the campsite and began attacking him using their razor-sharp claws and teeth. His cries for help echoed back towards the camp, where nearby guides quickly sprang into action. As they and other campers rushed to the cries in the darkness, by the time they got to Mark, it was already too late, and the injuries he sustained during the vicious attack would claim his life. His mother was informed moments later, and she broke down into tears, crying out for her son. How could this have happened? Surely it can't be true. It must have all seemed like a nightmare brought to life for the grieving mother. But for the wildlife guide, his job was far from over. Montague was tasked with guarding the young boy's body, as several nocturnal predators would have been drawn to the area due to the smell. Luckily for him, backup arrived sooner rather than later, saving him from becoming yet another victim of this heartbreaking story. As Matthew sat over Mark with nothing to think about but the young boy's untimely death, it's possible he began blaming himself for the incident. After all, he was employed to protect and advise the group as they explored the wilderness, and now he found himself defending the teenager's remains. While no one likely blamed him for the tragedy, it's difficult to avoid such emotions of regret and guilt when such devastating incidents occur. In the aftermath of Mark's death, his mother, heartbroken by the loss of her son, sought to sue Global Travel Marketing. However, she had signed a waiver before the safari trip that ensured the company wasn't liable for any injuries or deaths that occurred on the trip. In the weeks that followed, we can only imagine the sleepless nights and horrible thoughts that plagued the mother's mind. Over and over in her head, she likely wondered, what if she had heard Mark's cries sooner? What if they had decided to share a tent? Would her son have survived? In the end, she was forced to accept the reality that her young, adventurous son was now gone. The story of Mark Garrit Shea is a stark reminder of the inherent dangers associated with wildlife encounters in the plains of Africa and elsewhere. Unlike young Mark, Lisa Manders was forced to look into the eyes of a wild animal as it charged at her from a distance. The story begins on June 5, 2024, when 70-year-old Lisa Manders and her husband Craig found themselves hiking through the scenic Lower Zambezi National Park. Originally from New Jersey, the happily married couple had planned the trip to Africa as a way to celebrate a special wedding anniversary. But they couldn't have imagined how much this event would change their lives. Manders, filled with anticipation and excitement, booked the once-in-a-lifetime trip through the American-based tour company African Portfolio. They were scheduled to embark on a 10-day safari that promised to give them an unparalleled experience, with the company arranging various components of the trip, including their stay at the Shea Lodge in Zambia. The first 4 days were magical, and the couple was in awe at the beauty of Zambia. Just as the advertisement had promised, they spent their days engaging in game drives, spotting the native wildlife, and taking in the local culture on downtime at their lodge. But on the 5th day of this unforgettable adventure, a horrible fate awaited them. On the morning of the 5th, they joined a group to embark on a so-called bushwalk through the Lower Zambezi National Park. As blue skies stretched endlessly above their head, in front of them lay an untouched wilderness filled with life. At one point of the walk, the group stumbled upon a partially submerged hippopotamus bathing in a body of water. From a distance, they snapped images and spoke of their amazement at seeing such a rare animal in the wild. The tour guides then encouraged the spectators to inch closer to the riverbank, as this would provide a clearer view of the hippo, making for a great picture. While several of the group, including Lisa, decided to get as close as possible, others were hesitant after previously noticing several signs warning of the dangers associated with getting too close to the wildlife. Lisa now found herself right on the water's edge, and as she snapped one last image of the hippo, it suddenly began snarling, and it rushed towards her without warning. Depending on the gender of the animal, it can weigh on average around 6,000 pounds, and when it has its sights set on a target, it can quickly become a life-or-death situation. Within a few mere moments, this day of adventure was turned on its head, and Lisa was running back towards the group, fearing for her life. But in the blink of an eye, the enormous mammal had caught up to her, and with one leap, its enormous mouth latched onto her head and body, crushing her with unimaginable force. She screamed out in agony, calling for help as the power of the hippo overwhelmed her. But the entire ordeal was over in a mere few moments. Her husband, Craig, witnessed the tragic event but could do nothing as the wild animal brutally attacked his wife. Hippos are famous for their incredibly powerful bite, which is strong enough to crush human bones with ease. By the time Craig could get to his wife's aid, her head had been completely crushed, and she suffered catastrophic injuries to her body, all of which later resulted in her death. How could such a routine trip through the bush have gone so wrong? Now forced to reconcile with their decision to encourage Lisa to approach the bank of the water, the various guides on shift that day may have felt a deep sense of regret for the role they played. While not directly responsible for the attack, they were employed to ensure each of the groups remained safe during their walk through the bush. And the simple mistake of encouraging one participant to get too close would result in a catastrophe on the greatest scale. On February 5, 2025, Craig filed a lawsuit against the tour company, alleging it failed to provide a safe environment for his wife during the safari experience. His team of lawyers proposed that Lisa's death was a direct consequence of their inability to adequately warn the group of the dangers associated with approaching animals on the trip, such as the hippo that tragically took his wife's life. Craig has opened up about the level of emotional distress he experiences on a daily basis. He was forced to watch as his wife was viciously attacked by the hippo, knowing there was nothing he could do. This has led him to experience severe and prolonged periods of depression, sorrow, and probably sleepless nights of flashbacks of that horrible day. I told this story before on my channel, but I think it's worth retelling. June 1st, 2015. 29-year-old Katherine Chappelle decided to spend the afternoon driving through the Gauteng Lion Park in Johannesburg, South Africa. This iconic region is truly a sight to behold and offers tourists the opportunity to get up close to the various rare species of animals, including lions and lionesses. Despite her enthusiasm to take in all nature had to offer, one simple mistake would result in a horrible tragedy, leaving her friends and family heartbroken. Originally from Rye, New York, Chappelle was based in Vancouver, Canada, and earned a reputation as a prominent video editor. Over the years, she acquired some level of fame in her industry, working on major projects, including HBO's Game of Thrones, as well as movies such as Godzilla and Captain America: The Winter Soldier. But beyond her everyday life, Katherine was also extremely passionate about animals, which led her to take a break from making blockbuster movies and move to South Africa to volunteer at a preserve that aimed to save elephants and rhinoceroses from poachers. She planned to document her time in Africa, with the hopes of turning it into a film in the future to highlight the dangers associated with the illegal hunting of endangered animals in the region. But before she got settled into work at the preserve, she planned to spend some time sightseeing in the region. This led her to the Lion Park on June 1st, where she was set to explore the wildlife alongside her local tour operator, Pierre Potgieter. The pair slowly drove through the Lion Park as Chappelle periodically stopped to take images of the packs of lions, as well as cheetahs, zebras, and various antelope species. Offering guests the chance to drive through the park at their own pace, officials reminded tourists that under no circumstances should they roll down their windows at any time. But, after spotting a pride of lions, it appears the excitement of Katherine got the better of her. Being in awe of the beauty of the animals in their native habitat, she rolled down her window in hopes of getting a clear image, but this quickly turned into a mistake. Witnesses at the park claim a lioness slowly approached Katherine's vehicle, and as it did, she slowly leaned out with her camera, breaching the safety protocols of the park. Then, before they could even blink an eye, the lioness lunged through the vehicle's open window and began to attack Katherine viciously. The incredibly sharp, retractable claws of this predator, combined with its powerful teeth, began to inflict serious injury on Katherine as she screamed for help. Potgieter tried his best to fend off the lioness, but he too sustained injuries as he frantically fought to halt the attack. The lioness then retreated from the vehicle after inflicting devastating injuries to Katherine's throat and upper body. Following this, Potgieter tried to apply pressure as best he could to the wounds of Katherine while screaming out for help, but there was nothing he could do. Just behind their vehicle sat Ben Govender, a 38-year-old engineer from the surrounding region who watched the entirety of the terrifying ordeal. At first, He saw the lioness approach Katherine's vehicle and even snapped an image of it perched against the door. Speaking of the initial experience, he was amazed as the lioness stood with its head in the window for at least 15 seconds, noting that Katherine sat face to face with one of the world's most incredible, furious, and magnificent animals. But then he claims the event took a turn for the worse. When speaking about the incident, he said, "It was terrifying." After the first bite, the lioness retreated from the car with blood dripping from her mouth and paw. As they looked on in horror, the bystanders thought the lioness was done and didn't like what she had just bitten, but they were wrong. Seconds later, it leapt back into the idle vehicle and proceeded to maul Katherine. Katherine had no way to defend herself against the vicious onslaught, and by the time park rangers rushed to the scene and scared off the lions, the damage was already done. Shortly after, medical assistance arrived, but Katherine succumbed to her injuries and was pronounced dead at the scene. As for Potgieter, he sustained injuries of his own and even suffered from a heart attack while trying to fend off the big cat in a desperate bid to save the young tourist's life. In the heat of the moment, it appears the tour guide tried to focus on saving the young woman's life as opposed to driving them to safety. A level of controversy arose in the weeks that followed the tragic event. Rumors began to emerge, suggesting that the pair were riding around the park with their window open during the duration of their trip. However, Potgieter denied the allegations in several statements. He then claimed an employee from the park had refused to drive them to a medical facility, instead leaving them in the vehicle. The ambulance arrived sometime after this encounter, leaving Potgieter to question if the employee had acted quicker and if Katherine's life had been spared. Local authorities did open an investigation and examined the safety protocols at Lion Park. They later produced a report that highlighted the fact that opening the windows of vehicles whilst driving through the enclosures is strictly forbidden, and the park was not liable for the incident despite its tragic nature. For Katherine, what had started out as an exciting sightseeing trip before moving on to the preservation would become a horrifying nightmare that would ultimately take her life. As for Potgieter, he would go on to make a full recovery, but no doubt the event left him traumatized. It's difficult to imagine the fear he must have experienced as he tried with all his might to fight off a fully grown lioness with nothing but his bare hands. He was forced to watch on as the animal brutally attacked Katherine before dying in his arms. Reflecting on the incident, maybe he wondered if he could have done more. Should he have demanded that the young woman close her window? Could he have driven off as the lioness approached the vehicle? Perhaps he even blamed himself for her untimely death. But sometimes when an event is so traumatic, we freeze. It's well known that lions generally don't attack humans at random. However, several recorded instances lead experts to propose that such attacks might occur when their usual prey is scarce, or if they are injured, leading them to seek alternative food sources, including humans. Katherine intended to make a film about the dangers of the illegal hunting of endangered animals in the region. Little did she know that her death was proof, might I say, of that. Want to support the channel? Join for exclusive perks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay bold and live brave.